uh, that's funny. So does it count me as one of the people that's in the live? Okay, we got the two peoples. So here we are. People are joining. Lovely. We're now at 3. So this is the most nerve-wracking part of any live, is where you watch the counters ticking up, going, "People love you. People love you." No, maybe they don't. Who knows? So here we go. It doesn't tell you who's in there, though. What? One appeared and disappeared. Okay, must have been something I said. Right. So we will begin with a tour of the area behind me. It's heavily tilted to one side. It looks like I'm in an earthquake. That's very strange. Let me see if I can fix that. Is this how found footage editing got started? It's just like TikTok. That's true. Yeah. You wait and you wait. Let's see. See, this doesn't make any sense. Does it sort of look square now? I think it looks square now. Hey, Chris, welcome. Good to have you here. Congratulations, you're part of official YouTube history. This is my first live on YouTube. Anyway, I think I'll be using this platform from now on because, well, it just looks nicer, I suppose. That kind of helps when you choose the platform that's actually devoted to the whole video platform thing and wasn't just an afterthought. Thanks, love. She says it's better. Right. So, what shall we talk about? No, I'm kidding. So tonight's session is going to be about role-playing, and specifically my experiences while role-playing, while being a game master. Now, in the lead up to that, while waiting for people to join, there's a few things I wanted to chat about. The main one being, every 2 weeks when I come onto these things now, I'm going to just touch on a few things that I experienced during the course of this week that I found interesting, and also specifically stuff that happens to me with work. For those of you who don't know, I'm a copywriter. I have spoken about it a few times. Now, what a copywriter is every time you see written words in an ad, that person wrote it. If there is spoken words in an ad, then in a commercial, then a person wrote it, and I am one of those persons. And of late, there have been a few. Clients are interesting creatures because they will say things not realizing that they sound like they have the dumb. It's not a conscious choice, I think. I just think that when they say these words, they don't actually hear them coming out of their mouths. And so it sounds like crap. For example, I was writing copy for a motor manufacturer today. We got feedback from client, which has the same effect on a creative team as you would get if you shouted bingo in a hall full of old ladies at a church. Without fail, to a man, everybody goes, so the feedback arrives. And they said, yes, for this line, we'd like you to remove including and replace it with either. I said, okay, you are aware that the sentence structure doesn't work for that. Now, I'm saying this in my head because I'm not allowed to talk to client. See, between the creatives and the client, there is a buffer called the account manager. Their job is to stop the creative team from saddling up doom hounds, finding where client lives, and setting their house on fire. So I sit, and there I am, and the thing comes is, we want, they say remove including because there are only 2 things in this. We don't want people to think that there are more than 2 things. Like, folks, you're offering it's an ad. It's a video ad on social media. You're allowed to lie. But really are allowed to lie. There's this thing where you say terms and conditions apply. No one reads those. You can put in those sections, we reserve the right to lie. But no, that's not how it works. And so we have the continual fun and joy. The best one, though, that I got was I write blogs for a construction company, or one of the writers that writes for this construction company. My best part came when said construction company has decided that what it's going to do is that its creative team, apparently they have one, I've never met them. It's their creative team would take their blogs, they would write the blogs, which is fine. Then, once they had written them, in massive air quotes this, written, spewed forth upon keyboard might be better. They will send it to me. Well, send it to an account manager. Again, the buffer is important, like the battlements on Helm's Deep. They're important. And then the account manager will sigh and think, I've got to hand this to Vic, and it's not going to be fun because Vic has anger issues. So I'll do this thing, and so he hands it to me. And basically, what he told me to do is, now, Vic, what I need you to do is to take this thing that they spewed upon their keyboard, and I need you then to turn it into English. And then he said something that really got my attention. He says, it looks like they've directly translated this from Afrikaans. And what? Now, just to segue for a moment, something which I never do. If you ever want some fun, find an Afrikaans newspaper website, an Afrikaans news media website. Take any of the articles, copy the text, and take it and paste it into Google Translate, and then tell it to translate it to English. Then, once you've looked at what AI is doing with it, then translate it back, copy it out. You have to copy it out. Otherwise, you see, Google's gotten wise to this. You have to copy it out, then you flip it over, you copy it out, close, open a new page on Google Translate, stick that back in, translate it to Afrikaans, and see what happens. And the Afrikaans that you will read is now, it's been dumbed down to a second language user level, easily. And I think if you keep doing that back and forth, you will eventually get bobotie recipes. It's just my theory. So I'm going, okay, so this is heavy construction stuff. How the actual is this going to work? So I start reading it. There are stages to this blog, because you can see here you used the reference material you had. Here you got tired of Googling and you just then copy pasted out of an American website. I know, because Word is now telling me that it's in American, in United States English. And then there's the last bit where they literally passed the sign that said, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And they're just going, their opinion comes out. We're going, yeah, and then they all died, the end. So I am now in the process of editing this document. And it's a novel experience. I must admit, it's not unlike editing a novel. But, you know, without... yeah, it's a lot like editing a novel. Let's go to the phones. No. What does it say? I love this. I love it when this happens. I get notifications on my phone about stuff that I'm already doing. Let's see. Now live on your channel. Do you ever get the feeling that the NSA just has days where they just mess with you? Now, the whole point, that was the segue. That was the first 10 minutes of this video, just talking about what's been going on. Now, what my experience was with role-playing. I first got into role-playing thanks to a quaint gathering of local geeks in South Africa. It's the oldest role-playing and geek convention in the entire country. It is called ICON, and it's been going since, I think, 1994. And it was, look, understand that I grew up in the Free State, a small Free State town called Welkom, which I mentioned in another live that I did. And so geek wasn't a thing. I didn't even know what geek was. Geek was a term I think I only really encountered properly when I came to Varsity, and that was still in Pretoria, which is another quaint little fishing village north of Johannesburg. And so it was around 2002, and this is entirely true. The guy who would eventually get me into super duper geekdom, my two brothers were always the pivotal ones in getting me involved in like all things geeky. I mean, my love of Star Wars comes from that, comic books, that sort of thing. So my brother had been in the army with this guy, and then I happened to walk into this comic book shop in Melville, in Johannesburg. The place is called Outer Limits, and not The Outer Limits to avoid copyright infringement, but Outer Limits. Went in, and there he was, a man called Grant, who had of the long hair, and looked at me like, you know, when the cops are trying to decide whether or not to commit brutality, like where they're just at the start of irritation. He did this. Actually, no, that's more like the look that a bouncer gives you just before he decides to throw you out. And he said, "Is so-and-so your brother?" I said, yes. "Oh, tell him Grant says hello." I'm like, okay. So I'm going to have to leave the shop now. And browsing became a big thing for me. This place was full of comic books and all sorts of things and amazing stuff. And I got to know Grant because of another friend, because there was a girl that was in Varsity that was friends with these people. And so Magic the Gathering, believe it or not, was the pivotal thing, because this woman was a friend of mine. She was dating a guy who was a magic judge. And then 3 wise men came along. And then Frodo and the rest of the fellowship arrived. Yeah, I know, it's a rather long, windy tale. But basically what ended up happening was that I ended up at ICON. Now, ICON is an experience. It used to be at the Jabula Recreation Center, which meant that you were in quite a packed place when it came to moving around, and it was always in winter. It was like July here, and it's July in the Southern Hemisphere is obviously our winter, and so moving around and just checking things out, and comic books and stuff. And at some point, I got press ganged into role-playing something. I was very good at wandering around. I'm still remarkably good at wandering around. You can ask my wife about how dangerous it is to take me shopping, because I will wander around. In the Australian outback, there's the term walkabout. I will wander about. And it's just, look, shiny. And how I didn't know I had ADHD at this stage is beyond me. So I'm walking around and I'm looking at all this stuff. And somebody said, "Vic, do you want to do role-playing?" What are it? Now, I lived through the Roy Gevaar, the fear of Satan as well. That's communism, but I feel the devil had horns, and there's a hammer and a sickle. And if you hold the sickle in a certain light, it doesn't freaking have horns, I know. So I lived through this period in South Africa where everybody was terrified of their own shadow. They were afraid of gay people, black people, of anything weird. And it's weird how South Africa inherited so much of America's behavior. lived with a system where we got it from them, where it says, oh, it's the Dungeons and Dragons and it'll get your children into Satan and all the rest of it. I'd heard of Dungeons and Dragons in so much that I'd seen ads for it inside comic books, but I didn't know what the hell it was. My closest association with Dungeons and Dragons was an animated cartoon series called Dungeons and Dragons, where it had characters in it that no longer exist. I mean, feel free to comment if you remember the show, but it was characters like Cavalier, which no longer exists. I think that was all in like first or second edition. So it was Cavalier, it's Ranger, which thankfully still exists, Wizard, Thief, Barbarian, Acrobat, which I don't think exists anymore. All these different classes. And so it was an amazing series to watch, although if you can find it now, do not watch it to the end if you're a fan, because like most horror movies produced now, they don't know how to finish. Great concept, but it's always, no, okay, so right. And what I love is that the cartoon series was apparently like what they did with Transformers. The Transformers cartoon series was designed to sell Transformer toys. With the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon series, how they managed to get it past the censors, I don't know. But I mean, they created the most mixed, well, semi-mixed gender-wise at least. I mean, they had a ginger, the black girl who was the acrobat, racist. Well, that's profiling. You had the dork who was the wizard, who was probably the closest to an actual D&D player you've ever seen. And you had the jock who was the ranger. Why there wasn't warrior as a class, I don't know. You had the irritation who played Cavalier. Cavalier has later become paladin, so that kind of explains the irritation factor based on what I know of people who the reputation that paladins have. Not saying any of that stuff. But yeah, so all of this happened. So that's what I knew of geekness, specifically rolling of dice and doing the thing. So I show up and I said, do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons? I'm like, sure. Okay. And so I start playing. I cannot remember what I played or what we were doing. I just know that I was sitting at a desk with 5 other people and someone called the Dungeon Master, which up until that point I knew involved whips, chains, and management of business skills in some sort of thing. So we played and it was fun. I thought it was interesting. You needed special dice, which I only knew a 6-sided dice. That's when someone said, that's a dice. I'm like, okay. I didn't know that it had an extended family. I didn't know it had a diminutive cousin that was only with 4 sides, which, side note, if you ever need improvised caltrops to stop an invading force, just drop a whole bunch of D4s on the ground. Wow, those things are sharp. Especially at 2 a.m. when you're pretty sure you picked up all your dice and you need to go to the bathroom. And then you get the overwhelming sensation of you feel pyramid power in an incredible sense as it slowly heads northwards while your southwards heading heel makes connection. And there in that moment, you generate kinetic energy as you fly through the frickin' roof. So as it stands, I've been playing this for a while. Now, Dungeons and Dragons, I can clearly remember when I made the step over to horror role-playing, that being Call of Cthulhu. That's when I noticed some severe changes. For example, hit points are a lot less liberal in Call of Cthulhu. When you play Dungeons and Dragons, you have some characters that have like 70, 80, Lord knows how many more hit points. If you have rolled particularly well on your character setup in Call of Cthulhu, you have 15, 16 if you're really lucky. Incidentally, if you roll really well on a gunshot wound, the person takes 10 points of damage, which means with one lucky shot, you can erase someone's pretty much everything and put them wheezing on the ground. So essentially, damage in Call of Cthulhu is like taking a shot of straw rum And if you've never experienced it before, I highly recommend it. It's a mind-boggling experience in the sheer power of throbbing Chanda. So I'm now playing Call of Cthulhu. They said, "Do you want to play this thing?" I said, "Sure." I'm going to play D&D. What's the worst that can happen? And that's the next thing I learned, was never test the GM. Because when you test a GM, a game master, you test fate. So I sit down at the desk. It's me. My game master was a game master. Few of you heard what you thought you heard. No. My GM was a guy called Graham Kane, who I would later find out had a psychotic bent to him that was actually quite terrifying. Because when he told stories, it was horrific. So he tells the story where essentially the characters, for lack of a better phrase, screw the pooch so spectacularly that they end up in hell. And I didn't know that it wasn't like reading from a storybook. Graham just made this up. Other people, I would later find out, told a very different version of what they saw in hell. So the characters get to hell. Hell, in Graham's mind, was remarkably gooey. Everything, the walls, the floors, everything was made out of human bits. Essentially, the minced meanderings and entrails of peoples compacted together with who knows what as mortar. We do not ask the builders of hell for what they wanted. And they made the thing, and there's this stuff, and it was gooey as hell and hilarious. Because we're playing this, and I soon found out that guns are useless in Call of Cthulhu. Which made me ask, well, why do we have them? And the GM, Graham, looked me in the eye and said, to give you a false sense of security. Now, where were we? And I was like, so we carry on playing, and then it gets worse, which is a great way to describe the Call of Cthulhu setting and experience. And then it got worse. So we have guns, and there are people doing horrible things, and then we're trying to get out of hell. And I mean, the description that was given to me was very simple. So when you play Call of Cthulhu, if there's a switch in the room, don't turn it on, because it might be a light switch, which means you can feel safe that, you know, there's nothing in the room. But what if you turn on the lights and then there is something in the room, and then things can see you? Yeah, behold my paranoia. So then there's that. Then if there's a book, don't read it. If there's a glass of something, don't drink it. If there's a strange object, don't touch it. This is why everything in Call of Cthulhu is shiny, even in the descriptions. Why? Because the kids playing have some form of ADD. And ADD kids like shiny things. So all this stuff, they said, oh, if you're going to go into a room, don't be first and don't be last. Try to be somewhere in the middle. Yeah, just to be on the safe side. I'm like, what the hell does that even mean, be on the safe side? So by the end of the session, I'm a bit shell-shocked. I'm going, oh, okay, so we died and a few people went insane. And then I met what would probably be, for me, my greatest influence for getting into Call of Cthulhu. He is the game master for me, just when it comes to introducing people to Call of Cthulhu. His name was Greg. Greg Holliman, a genius in my mind. And Greg said unto me this speech, which I don't remember offhand, but essentially is that he is Greg, he is the GM, listen to his instructions, and basically prepare to die. And he said, oh, did you die? I said, yeah, a few people went crazy. He said, good, you did it right. I'm going, well, if H.P. Lovecraft was in the room, would he also be going, you did very well? I don't know if that's the way Lovecraft spoke, but I always picture in my mind that's how he would sound. So I start playing Call of Cthulhu. Now, there are a number of stories surrounding role-playing that I've heard over the years. There have been incidents in the times when I've been playing that people will say stuff during sessions that will level a room. I found out very quickly that being a smartass can sometimes be to my detriment, because once you draw the attention of the game master, you are now in the line of fire. So we were playing Legend of the Five Rings, L5R, it's called. So if you ever hear L5R, that's what that is. Playing Legend of the Five Rings. And I'm supposed to be some random monk type dude, which is apparently Japanese for alcoholic, because that's what I remember my character doing. I mean, he's wearing like pretty much that handkerchief on the head that you see sometimes in old anime, and he's got a thing. And there was an incident that they told me about that had happened in a previous campaign. They said that the GM had dreamt up this extremely elaborate campaign where the party who was very low level would be on a boat, and they would have a clash with the enemy boat, the leader's main ship. And the lead villain would be on that ship, and he would taunt them. And then he would leave. And the campaign would begin, and they would spend the rest of their time chasing down this dude, and hopefully by the time they got to him, they would be high enough level to take him on. So then, one of the guys on the ship says, I cast Fireball. And they said, okay. And the GM's thinking, what's the worst that could happen? And then the GM cursed himself, because as luck would have it, this lowly flame-throwing human happens to crit his roll and throws a fireball with perfect accuracy at maximum damage. Have I mentioned that the lead villain is allergic to fire? And so the GM sits there as this lone player launches a fireball at his main character, and because they're rolling dice openly, the stats can't lie. The fireball connects the villain, who basically dies in one shot, leaving the GM, who spent 3 weeks creating all of the stuff that's supposed to come after this boat incident, doing this. Well, isn't that nice? Shall we take a break? And they took a break, and so the GM very rapidly came up with some more stuff for them to do. But I found out that this is par for the course when you're going to GM, because you never know what your players are going to do. When I was playing in that L5R campaign, this with these guys, we were in a situation where one of our people she was a female samurai, and she looked up and said, "We have to get that guy's attention." And I said, "Well, you're wearing that wooden armor, aren't you? Are you wearing anything underneath? Because then can't you just take the plates and like use like booby helio lamp, like just imagine the other dude sitting up in the top going, I don't know what the message is, but I like it." The room was floored, and we had to take a break for 10 minutes. And that's not the first time that such silliness has occurred. For those of you who are role players, and for the benefit of those of you who will see this, I'm going to tell you a story of Eric's Arrow. It is probably the most famous story in the history of Dungeons and Dragons. According to what I've read and stories that I've heard about it, this actually happened. Group of people were playing Dungeons and Dragons, one of whom was this guy was called Eric. So the GM paints a scene for them. The Dungeon Master system says, right, you managed to get your way through the forest. It's difficult going at first, but you managed to hack your way through. And finally you arrive in a clearing. And Eric asks, what's in the clearing? Oh, it's beautiful leafy green, and in the center of the clearing is a gazebo. And Eric says, I wasted with my crossbow. And so a hush falls over the table. People just sideways glancing at him, and the GM says, I'm sorry? He says, I wasted with my crossbow, the gazebo. I wasted with my crossbow. Did it take damage? Yeah, I guess. Can I fire again? Sure. What's it doing? Nothing. It's a gazebo. And he says, I fire again. I said, okay, you fire again. And he fires again. He says, well, what's it doing now? Nothing. It's a gazebo. Does it take damage? Yes, I suppose. And this carries on. Nobody in the group says anything. Just Eric and the GM going back and forth until eventually Eric uses fire arrows and burns down the gazebo. And he says, well, yes, you burned down the gazebo. I destroyed the gazebo! And then there was a moment and he said, sorry, what's a gazebo? And that group apparently couldn't play again for most of the night because they were too busy wheezing on the floor with laughter. A rule to live by if you're going to be role-playing is, well, know what your monsters are. Now, Call of Cthulhu. If you plan on getting into Call of Cthulhu, I can give you this advice right off the bat. Be prepared to murder your darlings. Now, that is usually a term used for copywriters, people who dabble with various kinds of writing art, so whatever characters you create, whatever dreams you may have, be prepared to murder your darlings. And no time is it more true than anybody who rolls up a character in Call of Cthulhu. Because you will find with monotonous regularity that the character you spend a meticulous amount of time, like a major amount of time pouring meticulous things into, creating this cool backstory, that dude is going to die very soon, or get maimed, or go crazy. And the reason is because of these vile things. The sound you are hearing is one of the most hypnotic in the world to geeks who roleplay. Because, like potato chips, these things, these dice, you can't have just one. These bloody things. These foul entities will dictate your life, your death, your sanity, whether you go to jail. Sounds like Two-Face's speech in the Batman animated series. Whether you live or die, whether you're good or bad, it's all arbitrary. Now, it's only arbitrary if you're the GM, because I've seen a lot of people going, ha-ha, I'm doing good, and then the dice fail, and the GM goes, it's well advised you don't do that in front of the players. They take umbrage to that. But these things, these dice, 7 objects that have so much power as to change the course of events in empires, as dramatic as that sounds. When you play Call of Cthulhu, you learn very quickly that the dice are truly impartial. However, the dice can hear you, and they will punish you if they dislike you. That is the paranoia of role players, and it's awesome. And I mean, my wife and I know someone who burned in effigy, and essentially not in effigy, who ritualistically burned one dice in front of the rest of the dice so they would roll better. And it works. I know somebody who microwaved their dice and they rolled better. Now, you can argue that because of physics, the heat caused the materials of the dice to change, but we all know the truth. The dice have seen the movie The Fly, and they don't want to become the Gundle and so they'll behave for a while until such point where you have 3 hit points left, and if you can just make this one shot, the monster that's attacking you will leave you alone, and maybe the party will find you and put a band-aid on your lacerated intestines. And so you roll, and clearly the dice were distracted by something shiny. And they go, what? Boom. And you land on a high number as opposed to a low number. And so the monster comes up to you and says, you know, if you just set fire to one of them, this wouldn't be happening to you right now. Incidentally, is this your pelvis? So, to give you an idea of some of the stuff that happens with my role players, I have a role-playing group that I run on a Tuesday night. And I've run it for quite a fair amount of time. I'd say easily 2 years or more. Actually, Chris, if you're listening, and I hope you are, how long have we been running this? Claire, I think you would know this as well, since you've had to deal with the fact that I suddenly vanish off the face of the earth. Welcome to those who've just tuned in. So let's say 2 or 3 years. We're about 3 years. We've been running with this role-playing group. Now, players have left, moved away, you know, that sort of thing. But we've carried on with this session. And every now and again, the dice, usually at least 3 times a session, dice will cause some fantastic things to happen. Like the Indiana Jones type character who is attempting to crawl along the side of an airship to climb in and be a hero. And he goes and he climbs and he fails his dexterity roll. And oh, look, he's a smear in a cornfield. He literally Wile E. Coyote'd himself when, well, from here to be. Then there was the time, so pre-2017, what? I think the group got together in 2014. My word. 6 years I've been killing these people. So, I think it goes more than 3, I think. I was still at uni. Oh, geez. Some of these people were still pursuing a higher education before I came along. That makes you feel all this. Now, I was a GM. And they were done still in school when I was still killing them. That's a terrifying voice, Vic. So, all that. I've even got the rocking chair. Let me do it. When I was GMing, they were still going to university. They done thought that they knew things. No, they done didn't. So, another fun moment. I'm getting looks in the comment section. Another fun moment that happened. Anybody who's ever read the works of H.P. Lovecraft, upon which Call of Cthulhu and the entire role-playing system is based, is the works of H.P. Lovecraft, the mythos has a very famous town in it called Innsmouth. Innsmouth, Massachusetts, I think it is. And it's all like, thanks very much, Chris. It's all like East Coast weirdness. And the East Coast weirdness, apparently in the United States, is quite spectacular. And wow, it gets weird. Because Innsmouth was one of those towns that, up until the War of 1812, was apparently very prosperous. Then their soldiers, their men folk went off to fight the war. A lot of them died in that war. They came back, and the city never really bounced back. Fishing was just getting back on its feet, and then they got hit by this weird disease. But the reality is that the town, and spoiler alert for those of you who, the book's only been out since 1933 odd or something, so, you know, I don't want to, you know, let enough time pass. So the people of Innsmouth have actually made a deal with this deity, this demigod called Dagon, Father Dagon and Mother Hydra, who happens to be their brother and sister. Yes, it's a family business. And so they made a deal with these creatures called Deep Ones. The Deep Ones would give them gold and prosperity and fish in exchange for sacrifices, and sacrifices then later turned in, can we have people staying over at your house, which later turned into, can we interbreed? Fun. So everybody in Innsmouth kind of looks like a fish person. And then all weird sort of hell broke loose. The FBI raided the town. This is all in the 30s. The FBI raided the town. There was torpedoes fired at the Deep Ones. City of Johanneth lay beneath the waves. And then all fell silent. The theory was that the evil had been quelled. Oh, they don't know it very well, do they? So But things were not as they would seem. Because things got really weird. And that's where my players came in. They rolled up these characters who were various different. They were investigators, and their job, one of their assignments was to go forth and find out what has happened with the surveillance team keeping an eye on Innsmouth. There's this barrier around Innsmouth that's been erected essentially to make sure that no one does anything stupid like going to pick over the city. The city was a pile of crap beforehand, so I don't know if anybody's just suddenly going, hey, I can open a driftwood business. So they arrive there, and there's a military blockade. By blockade, I mean there's like a handful of soldiers in uniform and bored out of their minds, because nothing ever happens in Innsmouth, doesn't it? So they arrive, and they start noticing there's been rumblings in the town. And the rumblings have gotten worse, that at night it sounds like, and this is impossible, the Marsh Gold Refinery has started up again. But how could this be? And so they go to investigate. And lo and behold, the town isn't quiet. It would appear that a faction fight has broken out between the surviving Deep Ones in what is left of Johannathle, which turns out to be quite a lot. They approach the town. The blue Deep Ones are the good guys-ish. The green Deep Ones are the villains, as proven by every video game you will ever play involving them. But the green ones have gotten a hold of a bit more firepower, and so they seem to be winning the fight. These two factions are fighting back and forth, and so our team happens to arrive when the ground begin to done shaketh, and near the Marsh Refinery, there's a huge crack in the ground that opens, and Deep Ones of different colors come spewing out, fighting, hacking each other to pieces. Our team has the usual reaction, which is the most intelligent reaction they ever did, which is hide. And so they do. But they approach and try to investigate, and lo and behold, a section of the ground bursts open, and a Shoggoth comes rolling out. Now, for those of you who've never heard the term before, a Shoggoth would be the most aggressive amoeba on Earth. Imagine an amoeba the size of a house, entirely black, covered in teeth and mouths and eyes. Essentially, all it wants to do is consume everything. So essentially, me, when I was in my teens, near a buffet. Now, all would be well, except for the sanity system in Call of Cthulhu. Sanity is a measurable quantity in Call of Cthulhu, and depending on how many sanity points you have, is how well you can handle certain things. But again, if your score is, let's say, 70, and you roll dice, and your dice, we have percentile dice, which is rolls in denominations of 100, for those of you who don't know. When you roll, if you roll below that amount, you don't lose sand, at least when I GM. Usually you're only supposed to lose one sand, then it's so that you're constantly losing sanity, and eventually your character will go insane by witnessing all this stuff. But this time, the characters are playing, they rolled sanity from seeing a Shoggoth, which is a nasty bloody thing to see when, the most important piece of media at the moment is radio. Movies are a thing, but they have, they just started, they've risen sort of thing. Silent movies are a thing, but nothing like, this isn't the Matrix that they're watching. There's nothing woo and ah about it. Radio drama is their entertainment. And so they have just witnessed a massive snot be hocked up from the bowels of the earth. They see it, and one of the players botches his roll. Now, by botch, critically fails his roll. Botching is another story. When you critically fail your roll, that means you rolled 95 or above, like rolling 5 or below. When you roll 95 or above, it is proper failing. Then you get rolling 100, which is proper failing, and you're paying dividends. So he rolls a 95 on his sanity, and he goes completely bonkers, for there's a temporary insanity. He sees the Shoggoth, and then, lo, his fear, his phobia is of intense darkness and what lives in it. And now he's just seen a chunk of intense darkness burst forth, and and it is deciding that it will eat everything, so he loses his stuff. To quote from one of those, what sanity is a challenge. challenge in a con game, but in a campaign it is a slow spin down unless there is a Shoggoth, which is very true. Chris Fisser, another very cool GM, one of the people who taught me what I do. And so yes, at a convention, sanity is the challenge to kick the crap out of the players. But when you've got a campaign, you can spread that out for a long while. It's the difference between having to deal with only one season of Game of Thrones or being forced to sit through the entirety of the final season all in one go. So he sees the Shoggoth, loses his mind. However, he gets it into his head, I will smite the darkness. So he takes forth a bandolier of grenades. Incidentally, the last time I ever gave any of my players more than one grenade. He gets like 4 grenades, pulls all of the pins, and critically succeeds on his throw. Because that's how dice are. Perfect throw. Plop into the middle of this writhing mass of black. And the explosions go off. And I say to the players, right, because of the explosion, the Shoggoth's goo is flying everywhere. Have I mentioned it's acid? You need to roll me your dodge, please. And everybody screws the pooch on that roll. So I roll up the damage on the Shoggoth, and that is roughly, it's 4d6, I think it is, every time a Shoggoth touches you. So the roll came up to about 25 or 26 damage. Essentially, everybody is dead. And I made a judgment call, basically because we're right at the damn start of the campaign. And like that GM who just saw his villain get barbecued, I went, nay, nay, you're all down to like blah points. And the blue deep ones, who were never supposed to help them, suddenly they say, we must help these people who did smiteth the Shoggoth. I don't know why they speak like it's Revelations. Grab them, yank, and away we go with the campaign. These are just some of the incidents. But for sheer unbridled carnage and just insanity and revenge, if you're looking for a great story, do the following. After you've viewed this, go into your search engine and search for Old Man Henderson. Okay? The short version of the legend of Old Man Henderson is that a Call of Cthulhu player got really, really tired of his GM, consistently screwing over the party with unfair rolls and unnecessary monsters, basically being an asshat. And so he decided to take revenge. He creates this character called Old Man Henderson with a 320-page backstory. He did this because he knew that the GM would never read the backstory, and so he could basically shove anything in there he wanted as time went on. Old Man Henderson wears a Hawaiian shirt, camo pants, army boots, camo shorts, mind you, and speaks in a very broken, shattered dialect of Scottish that nobody could understand. And I will not reveal what exactly happens, but I will tell you the last line of the story. And that is how Old Man Henderson won Call of Cthulhu. Go. There is an audio version of it you can listen to. It is sheer genius. Go. I would love to see somebody make it into an animated film. I think it would be hilarious. But just for the good of your immortal soul, which Cthulhu wants, just by the way. But in general, though, here's my advice when you're in a role-playing system. Number one, rules lawyering is a pain in the ass. The only time you should be really worried about the rules is if there are certain settings laid out for a job you're doing for a client. Then maybe listen to the rules, because you know there's money involved. Another thing is, if I heavily hint that there is something really shiny in the room, perhaps you should investigate it. I raise this point because Recently, my players were in a situation where they were within, what's the term, pissing distance of an enemy base, of a terrorist base that got bombed into ash. Basically bombed to scorched earth, not even the Stone Age, because the Stone Age left stones behind. This place got carpet bombed. And as they are retreating, I said, in all of the carnage and the dust, you can see this large cylindrical object. It looks like a capsule. It's chrome in its finish, and there's not a mark on it, it would seem. And they said, you know, we've got injured people here. We need to head back to base. And in my head, I heard someone go, I once saw a play called The Horror of the Soaps. In one scene, it basically explains how soap operas work. And in one scene, two characters demonstrate the difference between real life and soap operas. In real life, the two characters bump into each other. Say, oh, terribly sorry. Yes, it's my mistake. And they leave. And the creator of the show, of the director, essentially looks at him and said, you, this is not real life, it is soap opera. At the same time, when that incident happened, that same freaking voice was in my head going, fine. Chris, you don't need to apologize. You're just giving yourself away. So, I mean, you weren't driving. So, yeah, when someone spends time really describing something, investigate it. That said, though, this reminds me of a story of another time, a thing that happened in Dungeons and Dragons. Game masters do need to be careful of what they describe, because sometimes players who are overly enthusiastic will spend a lot of time looking at the pointless thing. What I mean is, there was an incident in a Dungeons and Dragons game that I heard about, where guys are at a castle, I think it is, and they're traveling up a road, and it says, this is more like not how you describe something, but choose your adjectives carefully. So they said, well, you're traveling up this, so we'll describe it. It says, well, we're traveling up this path, and on either side of you is an impenetrable hedge. So your players, aka the ADD crew, sees the impenetrable hedge and sees the word impenetrable. And to quote a South African colloquialism, went, is it, eh? Apparently, for the next 4 sessions, these players tried to find a way through the impenetrable hedge. They did everything to it, cast magic on it, fire. And I think, honestly, the only reason why the GM let this go on for as long as it did is because he was starting to have fun with them, which is an important thing. If you're going to be a GM or a player, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it? So they blasted this thing, did all sorts of stuff. Eventually, one of them went off, apparently. I think they got a magical sword of some kind. However they did it, they hacked through, they managed to get through the impenetrable hedge. It says, right, we're through. What do we see? Another impenetrable hedge. It is not recorded what the players said after that, because I don't think you can actually spell the sounds that came out of those players. I think if you want a similar effect, listen to the sounds of horny jackals copulating in the moonlight. Some of you are going to go Google that just now. So, why am I telling you all these stories? It's quite simple. I'm going to be doing something a bit different. Well, not different, but not the same. I decided it's Halloween, so I'm going to be running a campaign, 2 modules, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, this coming week for Halloween, because I thought, why not? So on Halloween, Saturday, I will be running a module that I co-wrote with a brilliant person called Anique. And it's the first module that I ever wrote, of only 2 that I ever co-wrote. And it's called Emerson House. Emerson House is a haunted house module. Now, to give you context, I wrote this thing while watching Ghost Ship and 13 Ghosts and Stephen King's Rose Red. I love the haunted house theme, especially when it's not a movie and I don't have to be in it. I can understand why writers of most horror movies now literally default to "and they all die" at the end. What they're doing is not creating a script. What they're doing is exorcising their demons, because therapy costs money. So Emerson House, haunted house, much like in the vein of Rose Red, but by the same token, there's a whole lot of crazy stuff that's happening there, and it was a lot of fun to make. So we created this module, and I'm getting to GM it again for the first time in at least over 5 or 6 years. And I will be GMing it for this group of people, 2 groups on Saturday and Sunday. And I invite you to come through to Nexus and be one of those people, basically. It's Halloween. Oh, yes, my wife is singing my praises. I've played it twice before dating my now husband. It's amazing. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you. It's good to know that you still have approval after all these years. And so we had a lot of fun. And yes, and Chris, you ran it as well, Mr. Fisser. And it's going to be a lot of fun. What I still need to do is properly reread it again, because I refuse to wing it this time, because I actually have a script. But I will say this: when instilling fear, the best advice I ever got when making people feel on edge is not by overloading them with information. Set the scene, and then just drop little things in, little bits here and there. Simple things like having them enter a room and building the atmosphere, knowing full well that nothing is in there, and build the atmosphere some more, and build the atmosphere some more. And then at the most inopportune moment, you can say, "Who closed the door?" And because the door is closed now. And so we tried to open it and said, "Well, you can't, because there isn't a door handle anymore." And that pause is all important, I find, because there's something amusing about watching a group of people just waiting for more information. And you just go, "Yes." And then just leaving them to quietly lose their collective hoo-ha. I know it sounds sadistic, probably because it is, but it's a heck of a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it. I mean, I grew up hearing, looking back, there were all these signs that people were trying to scare me about the dangers of Dungeons and Dragons and so on. And all that I've found is that with role-playing, the only thing it actually did was teach me how to think on my feet, how to use my imagination, and how to have fun with nothing more than a set of dice, a piece of paper, and a pencil. And that's all it is. That's all it ever is. It's literally the best theater of the mind. It's like a radio play, but it's a ghost story, but you're in it. It's an interactive ghost story. And with Call of Cthulhu, it can be in a number of places. I've had stories play out in haunted houses. I've had them play out under the streets of a major city. There have been ones that have played out in airships, among the clouds, in the ocean, under it, in a submarine that everybody thought had been scuttled and was dead. No, in fact, it's very much alive. All these things. And it is the safest form of horror you can do. As long as you can get over all the people screaming, because when people really get into the role-playing, there's going to be screaming. It's just how it is. We're coming up to the end of the stream. I wanted to find out if there's any questions. Fire away, and I'll be happy to answer them. Apart from that, this is fun. I hope to be doing that. I think I'm going to be using this platform from now on, because the resolution's a lot better, I find. This was yet another experiment, because I've done like 3 or so live streams via Facebook, and now I'm trying the YouTube thing. But yeah, the main thing is just to have fun. I mean, there's the usual thing, we must produce content and stuff like that. But this is cool. I don't mind this. And finally, I get to use the webcam that I spent ages trying to find for something other than a Zoom meeting. So folks, as with the word Zoom, time has flown by. You've been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, like, share, subscribe. Please. What? Says, and there's hardly any delay here. Facebook was like 30 seconds. So, funny enough, there is a setting when you do live streams on YouTube where you can say questionable content. If someone says sweary things in the comments, it will delay it for your review. So if you're ever doing one of these and you see me go, well, that was unnecessary, then you'll know someone has said a sweary thing. So yeah, this has been fun. Thank you for those of you who came through. This is now going to live on my channel, and people can have a look. And yeah, I'll see you again in 2 weeks. And like I said, like, share, subscribe. My support the artist link is going to be at the bottom of the page here. Well, not actually in here because I really haven't gotten that good at editing. But it's in the description of the video below. Feel free to share those details. Essentially, this is how I monetize my content before I can monetize my content. And it's how you can show support. It's no obligation, as I've said before. And yeah, it's good fun. Folks, thank you, and I'll see you again.